The air inside the command center of Iron Shield Security was always set to exactly 68 degrees. It was a dry and artificial cold that kept the senses sharp and the mind alert. For Malik Washington, this temperature was not just a preference, it was a necessity. He sat in his ergonomic leather chair with his spine straight and his shoulders squared. Even when he was alone in the office, he maintained the posture of a United States Marine. That part of his life had ended 4 years ago, but the discipline had never left his bones. On the wall in front of him, 12 high-definition monitors hummed with a soft electric blue light. They displayed live feeds from warehouses, gated communities, and private estates across the outskirts of Dallas. These were his contracts. These were the people who paid him to ensure that their worlds remained safe and untouched. Malik scanned the screens with a predatory focus. His eyes moved from the loading dock of a logistics center to the perimeter fence of a luxury car dealership. Nothing moved in the grainy shadows of the feeds. Everything was secure. Everything was under control. Control was the only thing that mattered to Malik. He was 32 years old and he had spent the last decade building a fortress around his life. He had built this company from nothing but a small loan and his own sweat. He had no partners. He had no investors. He answered to no one. The silence in the room was heavy and thick, but to Malik it sounded like success. It was the sound of peace. Then the silence shattered. His cell phone vibrated violently against the glass surface of his desk. The buzzing sound was like a drill boring into the quiet atmosphere he had cultivated. Malik did not jump. He simply shifted his gaze from the monitors to the phone screen. The name flashing on the display was Viola. Malik stared at the name. He did not reach for the device. His hand remained resting on the arm of his chair, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the leather. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. He knew exactly why his mother was calling. Viola Washington did not call to ask how his day was going. She did not call to congratulate him on securing a new contract or to ask if he was eating well. She called when the walls were closing in on them. She was calling for Otis. Malik could almost hear the script before he even answered. It would start with tears. She would talk about her blood pressure or her heart palpitations. She would say that the stress was killing her. Then she would pivot. She would say that his father had made a mistake, just a small mistake, a misunderstanding with a business partner, a bad investment. But Malik knew the truth. Otis Washington did not have business partners. He had bookies. He did not make investments. He made bets. The phone continued to buzz. It was a demand. It was a summons. Malik reached out and pressed the button on the side of the phone. He silenced the call and flipped the device face down. The vibrating stopped. The room returned to its perfect and cold silence. He let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. A heavy weight settled in his chest. It was a familiar sensation. It was a mixture of guilt and rage that had hardened into a cold stone over the years. People in his community often spoke about the importance of family. They preached that blood was thicker than water. They said that a man who turned his back on his kin was no man at all. Malik had heard it all his life. He had heard it from the pulpit at church on Sundays. He had heard it from his aunts and uncles at family reunions. But Malik had learned a different lesson. He had learned that sometimes blood was not a bond. Sometimes blood was a shackle. He stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the parking lot. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. He saw a tall man with dark skin and eyes that looked older than his 32 years. He saw a man who had been carved out of solitude. Being a black man in America who chose the path of independence was a lonely journey. There was a specific kind of isolation that came with success when you were the only one in your circle who had made it out of the crab bucket. Malik remembered the early days when he had first started making real money. He had been generous. He had paid off his parents' credit cards. He had bought Dante a car. He had tried to lift them up with him. But he quickly realized that he was not lifting them up. He was only enabling them to dig deeper holes. They did not want his guidance. They did not want his discipline or his advice on how to build credit and save assets. They only wanted the fruit of his labor. They wanted the check without the sweat. To them, he was not a son or a brother. He was a resource. He was an ATM machine that breathed. Malik clenched his jaw as he looked out at the empty asphalt. He did not hate them. That would have been easier. Hate was a clean emotion. It burned hot and fast. What he felt was disappointment. He felt the crushing weight of being invisible. They did not see the 18-hour workdays. They did not see the years he spent sleeping on a cot in his office because he could not afford an apartment and a lease for the business at the same time. They did not see the terror of those nights in the desert overseas when he prayed he would make it home in one piece. They only saw the suit he wore now. They only saw the new truck in the driveway. They saw the result, but they refused to respect the process. He turned away from the window and looked back at his monitors. The screens flickered with the lives of strangers. His job was protection. His company Iron Shield was built on the promise of safety. He protected wealthy business owners from thieves. He protected warehouses from vandals. He protected assets from being drained by external threats. He was an expert at identifying risks. He could look at a building and tell you exactly where the weak points were. He could look at a perimeter fence and tell you where a breach would happen. The irony was bitter enough to taste. He spent his days protecting strangers from the world, but when the sun went down, he had to protect himself from his own people. The biggest threat to his stability was not a burglar in a ski mask. It was not a rival security firm. It was the people who shared his last name. It was the people who knew his birthday. It was the people who knew exactly which emotional buttons to press to make him bleed. He walked back to his desk and picked up the phone again. There was a voicemail. He did not listen to it. He knew what it said. He could imagine Viola's voice cracking with manufactured desperation. He could imagine Otis in the background pacing the floor in his shiny shoes, waiting for the bailout that was not coming, not this time. Malik deleted the voicemail without playing it. This was the new rule. This was the boundary he had drawn in the sand. He had spent too many years trying to buy their love and their respect. He had spent too many years hoping that if he just gave enough, they would finally see him as a man and not just a wallet. But respect could not be bought. It had to be earned, and they had never respected him. They had only used him. He sat back down in his leather chair. He adjusted his tie. He looked at the blue light of the monitors. This was his reality. This was his kingdom. It was cold. It was quiet. It was lonely, but it was safe. He had built a wall around his life brick by brick. And for the first time in 32 years, he was not going to open the gate just because someone on the other side shared his DNA. Malik Washington was done being the savior. Today, he was just the invisible man in the high tower. And he had work to do. The highway stretching out before Malik was a ribbon of heat and asphalt that cut through the Texas landscape. He drove his black pickup truck with the windows rolled up and the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the afternoon sun. The city of Dallas faded in his rearview mirror. The skyscrapers and the noise of the urban sprawl were replaced by flat plains and the stubborn green of mesquite trees. This was the drive home. Not the home where he slept or where he paid his mortgage. This was the drive to the only place where his soul had ever felt at rest. He was heading to the farm. The tires hummed a monotonous rhythm against the pavement. It was a sound that usually lulled him into a state of calm. But today the road felt different. Today the road felt like a tunnel into the past. Every mile marker he passed seemed to strip away a layer of the armor he wore as the CEO of Iron Shield. As the landscape became more rural and the dirt roads began to intersect with the highway, he felt the phantom weight of grease on his hands. He looked down at his hands gripping the steering wheel. They were clean. They were manicured. The skin was smooth and unblemished. But in his mind, he saw them as they were 17 years ago. He saw them stained black with oil and scarred by metal. The memory hit him with the force of a physical blow. He was 15 years old again. The air was thick with the smell of diesel fuel and stale bourbon. It was 2 a.m. inside the family garage. The single fluorescent light overhead buzzed like an angry insect. In the center of the garage stood the beast. It was his father's primary 18-wheeler. The truck was the lifeline of the family business. It was the machine that put food on the table and clothes on their backs. And it was dead. Otis Washington stood by the workbench. He was still wearing his suit from earlier in the day, but the tie was loosened and his eyes were bloodshot. He held a glass of dark liquor in his hand. His hands were shaking. He looked at the truck with a mixture of hatred and terror. "We are going to lose the contract," Otis slurred. His voice was thick with self-pity. "The logistics manager is coming at 8 a.m. If this rig does not start, he pulls the deal. We are finished. We are ruined." Otis took another long drink. He did not pick up a tool. He did not open the manual. He simply drowned his fear in amber liquid. He was a man who loved the idea of being a boss but crumbled under the weight of the work. Malik did not say a word. He was just a boy. He was skinny and quiet, but he understood the stakes. If the truck did not run, the family did not eat. He watched his father collapse into a folding chair, muttering about bad luck and cruel fate. Malik turned away from the pathetic sight. He walked to the red toolbox. He pulled out the heavy wrench. It felt cold and solid in his hand. He slid underneath the massive chassis of the truck. The ground was cold concrete. Oil dripped onto his cheek. It was hot and smelled of burnt carbon. Malik ignored it. He focused on the transmission. He focused on the intricate puzzle of gears and pistons. For the next 6 hours, he did not stop. His knuckles scraped against rusted bolts until they bled. His shoulders burned with a fire that made him want to scream. Sweat poured into his eyes and stung like acid. Above him, Otis snored in the chair. The father slept while the son carried the weight of the world on his back. Malik worked through the darkness. He replaced the gasket. He tightened the loose valves. He flushed the line. He poured every ounce of his teenage strength into that machine. He wanted to save them. Deep down, in a place he was afraid to touch, he wanted something else. He wanted Otis to see him. He wanted his father to look at the running engine and realize that Malik was worthy. He wanted to be the hero. The sun began to bleed through the dusty windows of the garage. It was 7 in the morning. Malik crawled out from under the truck. He was covered in filth. His face was smeared with black grease. His clothes were ruined. But he stood up and wiped his hands on a rag. He climbed into the cab and turned the key. The engine roared to life. It was a deep and thunderous sound. It was the sound of victory. Otis jumped up from the chair. He looked around wildly. When he saw the truck vibrating with power, a wide smile broke across his face. He did not look at Malik. He looked at his watch. "Get cleaned up," Otis barked. He rushed out of the garage to shower and put on a fresh suit. Malik stood there alone. He was exhausted. His body trembled from the exertion, but he felt a swell of pride. He had done it. He had saved the contract. An hour later, the client arrived. Mr. Henderson was a tall, white man with a clipboard and a stern expression. He walked around the truck, inspecting the tires and listening to the idle of the engine. The truck purred perfectly. "This sounds solid," Otis, Mr. Henderson said. "I was worried when I heard about the maintenance issues, but this machine is ready to haul." Otis stood tall. He had shaved and smelled of expensive cologne. He puffed out his chest. "We take maintenance seriously here," Otis said smoothly. "We do not cut corners." Just then, the side door of the house opened. Dante walked out. He was 18 years old. He was wearing a crisp white polo shirt and khaki pants. He held a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked fresh and rested. He had slept through the entire night while Malik bled on the concrete. Otis smiled and beckoned Dante over. He placed a heavy hand on Dante's shoulder. "Mr. Henderson, I want you to meet my oldest boy." "Otis," said his voice swelling with pride. "This is Dante. He manages the fleet for me. He makes sure these beasts stay on the road. He is the brains of the operation." Malik stood in the shadows of the garage door. He was still wearing his oil-stained coveralls. He held the greasy rag in his hand. He waited for Otis to correct himself. He waited for his father to say that it was Malik who had spent the night in the dirt. He waited for even a glance. But Otis did not look at him. Otis looked at Dante with adoration. Dante smiled a charming and vacuous smile and shook Mr. Henderson's hand. "We aim for perfection," Dante said effortlessly. Malik felt something break inside his chest. It was not a bone. It was something far more vital. It was the fragile hope that his hard work would ever matter to these people. He looked at his dirty hands. Then he looked at Dante's clean, manicured fingers wrapping around the client's hand. In that moment, the truth became crystal clear. It was a cold and sharp realization. To Otis and Viola, he was just a tool. He was the wrench. He was the grease. He was the thing you used when something was broken and then threw back in the dark box when you were done. Dante was the trophy. Dante was the reflection they wanted the world to see. Malik dropped the rag. It hit the floor with a wet slap. No one heard it. No one looked. He was invisible. He turned around and walked back into the darkness of the garage while his father and brother laughed in the sunlight. He did not cry. Tears were for children who believed in fairness. Malik was no longer a child. He was a machine built for labor, and he had just learned his purpose. Back in the present day, Malik tightened his grip on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The farm was approaching on the right. The memory faded, but the scar remained. He was 32 years old now. He was rich. He was powerful. But a part of him was still that 15-year-old boy standing in the shadows covered in grease, watching his father give away his glory to a ghost. He turned the truck onto the gravel driveway. The tires crunched loudly. He was not coming here for glory today. He was coming for the only two people who had ever looked at his dirty hands and said thank you. He was coming for the truth. The black pickup truck rolled to a stop in front of the main house. The engine ticked into silence as the dust from the gravel road settled around the tires. Malik sat inside the cab for a moment longer than necessary. He took a deep breath. The air here was different. It did not smell of asphalt and city exhaust. It smelled of pine needles and damp earth and the sweet smoke of hickory wood drifting from the backyard smoker. This was the scent of his childhood sanctuary. It was the smell of safety. He opened the door and stepped out. The ranch sprawled out before him like a kingdom carved from the wild Texas landscape. It was 500 acres of prime grazing land and timber. In the distance, the massive metal barns of legacy haulage shimmered under the afternoon sun. Dozens of 18-wheelers were parked in neat rows like soldiers standing at attention. This was not just a business. It was a monument to black resilience. The front door of the sprawling ranch house opened before Malik could even reach the steps. Mr. Silas stood in the doorway. He was 65 years old, but he stood with the posture of a man half his age. He wore a pressed white shirt and black trousers. He had served as the housekeeper and confidant to Malik's grandparents for over 20 years. To the outside world, he was an employee. To Malik, he was the gatekeeper. "Welcome home, Mr. Malik," Mr. Silas said. His voice was deep and gravelly. "It is good to be back," Silas Malik replied. He shook the older man's hand. The grip was firm and dry. "They are waiting for you on the back porch," Silas said. He stepped aside to let Malik pass. Malik walked through the house. The interior was a museum of memories. The hardwood floors were polished to a mirror shine. The walls were lined with black and white photographs of men in work clothes standing next to old trucks from the 1960s. There were framed newspaper clippings about the founding of Legacy Haulage. Every object in this house told a story of struggle and triumph. It was a sharp contrast to the hollow luxury of his parents' house, which was filled with rented furniture and leased cars. He stepped out onto the expansive back porch. The heat of the day had begun to fade into a comfortable warmth. Two rocking chairs creaked rhythmically against the wooden floorboards. Big Mama Hattie saw him first. She stood up with a speed that defied her 70 years. She was a small woman with skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that sparkled with a fierce intelligence. She wore a floral apron over her dress. "Look who it is," she exclaimed. She opened her arms wide. Malik stepped into her embrace. She smelled of flower and peaches. For a brief second, the armor he wore fell away. He was not the CEO of Iron Shield. He was just her grandson. He buried his face in her shoulder and let out a long sigh. "You look thin, Malik," she scolded gently as she pulled away. She patted his cheek. "Are you eating, or are you just working and worrying?" "I am eating." "Big Mama." Malik lied. She narrowed her eyes, but she smiled. "I made peach cobbler. It is in the kitchen. But first, go talk to your grandfather. He has been watching the road for you." Malik turned to the other rocking chair. Big Papa Jeremiah sat there like an ancient king on his throne. He was a giant of a man even in his old age. His hair was white like cotton and his hands were large and calloused. He held a wooden cane in one hand and a glass of sweet tea in the other. He did not smile often, but his eyes held a warmth that was reserved only for Malik. "Sit down, son," Big Papa said. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Malik sat. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just looked out over the land. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the fields. A herd of cattle moved slowly in the distance. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Big Papa asked. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of history. "It is," Malik agreed. "Do you know why I bought this land?" Big Papa asked. He did not wait for an answer. He had told this story 1,000 times, but Malik never tired of hearing it. "I bought this land because they told me I could not have it," Big Papa continued. "When I walked into the bank in 1968, the loan officer laughed at me. He told me that a black man had no business owning 500 acres. He told me to go back to driving trucks for white folks." Big Papa took a sip of his tea. His hand trembled slightly, but his grip on the glass was iron. I worked 3 jobs. Your grandmother baked pies and sold them at the church. We saved every penny. We did not buy new clothes. We did not go on vacations. We bought dirt. Because dirt is the only thing that lasts. He turned his head to look directly at Malik. His eyes were intense. This is the lesson, Malik. They can hate your skin. They can hate your hair. They can try to keep you out of their country clubs and their boardrooms. But they cannot deny the deed. When your name is on the paper, you have power. This land is not just soil. It is freedom. Malik nodded solemnly. I understand, Big Papa. I know you do, the old man said. You are the only one who understands. The tone of the conversation shifted instantly. The warmth evaporated from the air, replaced by a sudden chill. Big Papa leaned forward. The rocking chair stopped moving. Your father was here yesterday, Big Papa said. His voice was hard now. Malik stiffened. What did Otis want? Money. Big Papa spat the word out like it tasted of poison. It is always money with him. He says he has a new investment opportunity. He says he needs $50,000 to bridge a gap. But I know better. I looked in his eyes, Malik. I saw the desperation. He owes people. Dangerous people. Malik felt a surge of anger. He tried to sell you a dream again. He tried to sell me my own grave, Big Papa said darkly. He asked about the will. He asked if I had updated the beneficiaries. He brought your Uncle Marcus into the conversation on the speakerphone. Uncle Marcus, Malik repeated. Yes, Big Papa said. Marcus is worse than Otis. Otis is a fool, but Marcus is a snake. Marcus lives in Chicago and wears expensive suits, but he has the soul of a scavenger. He was asking about the liquidity of the company. He wanted to know if we could sell the fleet quickly if something happened to me. Big Mama Hattie had stopped bustling in the kitchen. She stood at the screen door listening. Her face was pale. They are waiting for us to die, Malik, she said softly through the mesh screen. Her voice trembled with a mixture of sorrow and fear. They are not waiting for their inheritance. They are waiting for the carcass so they can pick the bones clean. Malik looked from his grandmother to his grandfather. He saw something he had never seen before. He saw fear. Not fear of death, but fear of what would happen to their legacy after they were gone. They had spent 50 years building a fortress, and now the enemies were inside the gates. I will not let them take it, Malik said. His voice was low and dangerous. I will protect this place. Big Papa reached out and placed his heavy hand on Malik's knee. The grip was painful. You have to be ready, son. This is not going to be a family dispute. This is going to be a war. I have set things in motion. I have spoken to lawyer Elijah Stone. We have created safeguards. But papers are just papers. Big Papa leaned back in his chair. He looked tired. The golden light of the sunset highlighted the deep lines of worry etched into his face. Otis and Marcus are weak men, he said, and weak men are dangerous because they have no honor. They will lie, they will cheat, they will use your mother against you, they will try to destroy your reputation. He looked Malik in the eye. The gaze was piercing. It was a command from a general to his soldier. The wolves are coming, grandson, Big Papa whispered. And they are hungry. You need to be the wolf that bites back. Malik stared at the old man. He felt a cold resolve settle in his stomach. The peaceful afternoon was gone. The smell of peach cobbler and pine was still in the air, but underneath it was the metallic scent of a coming battle. I am ready, Malik said. Big Papa nodded slowly. Then he picked up his cane and pointed toward the setting sun. Good, because when the sun goes down, the monsters come out. And you are the only light we have left. The blue light from the monitors inside the Iron Shield Command Center usually offered Malik a sense of absolute control. But on that Thursday morning, the screens felt like windows into a world that was about to shatter. It was 10 in the morning. The coffee in his ceramic mug had gone cold. He was reviewing a perimeter breach report from a warehouse in North Dallas when his personal cell phone rang. It was not the shrill vibration of a client call. It was the heavy and insistent ringtone he had assigned to the few people who mattered. He looked at the screen. It was Sheriff Ramirez. Ramirez was the local sheriff of the county where the farm was located. He was a man of few words who had known Big Papa Jeremiah for 40 years. Malik felt a sudden and sharp drop in his stomach. It was a physical sensation like missing a step on a steep staircase in the dark. He picked up the phone. Sheriff Malik said. His voice was steady, but his hand gripped the desk hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Malik Ramirez said. His voice was thick and cracked. "I am so sorry, son. You need to come down here. It is the small airfield off Route 9. Malik did not ask why. He did not ask what had happened. His mind was a tactical computer that instantly processed the data and calculated the only possible outcome. His grandparents had taken their small twin-engine plane out that morning for a trip to verify a new land purchase in the neighboring county. Big Papa loved to fly. He said it was the only time he felt truly free from the weight of the earth. "Are they gone?" Malik asked. The question hung in the air like a blade. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "There was an engine failure on approach," Ramirez said softly. "They are gone, Malik." The world did not explode. There was no screaming. There was no chaotic noise. Instead, there was a deafening silence that sucked the air out of the room. Malik slowly lowered the phone. He stared at the monitors. The security feeds continued to cycle. A delivery truck backed into a loading dock. A security guard patrolled a fence line. The world kept turning. The commerce of Dallas continued to flow. But for Malik, the axis of his universe had just snapped. He sat there for 5 minutes. He did not move. He did not blink. He felt a sensation of profound weightlessness. For 32 years, Jeremiah and Hattie Washington had been his gravity. They were the solid earth beneath his feet. They were the moral compass that pointed true north. Now they were gone. He was untethered. He was floating in a cold and dark void. He stood up. He put on his suit jacket. He buttoned it. He checked his pockets for his keys and his wallet. He moved with the robotic precision of a man in shock. He walked out of the office and into the blinding Texas sun. The drive to the county morgue took 45 minutes. Malik drove at exactly the speed limit. He gripped the steering wheel so tight that his forearms ached. He did not turn on the radio. He needed the silence. He needed to prepare himself for the reality of seeing them cold and still. He needed to build the wall around his heart that would allow him to function. When he arrived at the county building, the parking lot was already full. He recognized his father's leased luxury sedan. It was parked crookedly across 2 spaces. Malik parked his truck and walked toward the entrance. The heat was oppressive. The air smelled of melting asphalt and exhaust. He entered the waiting room. It was a sterile space with gray linoleum floors and rows of uncomfortable plastic chairs. He expected to see a scene of devastation. He expected to see his father and mother holding each other in shared grief. He expected to see the raw and ugly pain of loss. What he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. Otis Washington was standing by the vending machine. He was wearing a bright blue suit that looked too festive for the occasion. He was not crying. He was not sitting with his head in his hands. He was on his cell phone. His back was turned to the door so he did not see Malik enter. Malik walked closer. His footsteps were silent on the linoleum. He had learned to move without sound in the deserts of foreign lands, and he used that skill now. He stopped 10 feet away from his father. "I understand that," Otis said into the phone. His voice was loud and agitated. "But I need to know the timeline. Yes, the will. I need to know how quickly we can access the liquid assets. The company accounts. Listen to me. I am the only son. I am the next of kin. I need you to prepare the paperwork for the transfer of ownership immediately." Malik felt a cold rage spread through his veins. It started in his chest and moved down to his fingertips. His grandparents were lying in the next room. Their bodies were likely still warm. The wreckage of their plane was still smoking in a field somewhere, and Otis was already counting the money. He was already measuring the casket for gold handles. Otis laughed into the phone. It was a nervous and greedy sound. "No, there is no one else. Just me. My son Dante will help me manage the transition. We have big plans for the land." Malik stepped forward. Otis turned around and saw him. For a split second, there was a look of panic in Otis's eyes. It was the look of a thief caught with his hand in the register. But it vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of performative sorrow. "Malik," Otis said. He lowered the phone but did not hang up. "Oh, son, it is a tragedy. A terrible tragedy." Malik looked at his father. He looked at the dry eyes. He looked at the phone still clutched in the manicured hand. "Who are you talking to?" Malik asked. His voice was low and dangerous. Otis stammered. Just family friends, letting them know the news." "You were talking about assets," Malik said. "You were talking about the transfer of ownership." Otis straightened his tie. He tried to regain his composure. I have to be practical, Malik. Your grandfather left a massive empire. Someone has to step up and manage it. Someone has to ensure the legacy continues. The legacy, Malik repeated. You do not know the meaning of the word. He walked past his father. He did not look back. He pushed through the double doors to find the coroner. He needed to see them. He needed to say goodbye to the only parents he had ever known. And he needed to apologize to them. He needed to apologize for the vultures that were already circling their bodies before they were even in the ground. The days leading up to the funeral passed in a blur of gray misery. The farmhouse, which had always been a sanctuary of light and warmth, now felt cold and violated. The silence of the ranch was broken by the sound of cars coming and going. The vultures had arrived in force. 2 days before the service, Malik stood in the living room of the main house. He was watching Mr. Silas polish the silver tea set that Big Mama had loved so much. Mr. Silas moved with a slow and mournful rhythm. His eyes were red and swollen. He had lost his best friends and his employers in a single afternoon. The front door opened with a loud bang. A gust of hot air and loud voices filled the room. Uncle Marcus had arrived. Marcus entered the room like a conquering general. He was a tall man who lived in Chicago and worked in what he called high finance. He wore a suit that cost $2,000 and shoes made of Italian leather. He had not visited the ranch in 5 years. He had missed Christmas. He had missed birthdays. But he had not missed this. Malik Marcus boomed. He walked over and pulled Malik into a hug. The embrace was stiff and artificial. Malik could smell expensive cologne and stale cigarettes on his uncle's breath. Marcus patted Malik's back 3 times, then pulled away. He held Malik by the shoulders and looked him in the eye. You have grown, nephew, Marcus said. You look strong. That security business must be treating you well. While he spoke, Marcus's eyes were not on Malik. They were darting around the room. They lingered on the antique grandfather clock in the corner. They scanned the oil painting above the fireplace. They assessed the value of the Persian rug on the floor. He was not looking at a home. He was looking at an estate sale. Seeing Marcus brought a bitter taste of bile to Malik's throat. A memory flashed in his mind. It was sharp and vivid. He was 18 years old. He had just graduated from high school with good grades. He had been accepted to a local university with a partial scholarship. He wanted to study business. He wanted to stay close to the ranch and learn the logistics company from Big Papa. Marcus had taken him aside on the porch that summer. Marcus had handed him a beer and put an arm around his shoulder. Listen to me, nephew, Marcus had said smoothly. Do not stay here. This town is a trap. You do not want to be stuck driving trucks and moving boxes your whole life. You are made for bigger things. Join the Marines. See the world. Become a warrior. That is where the glory is. Malik had listened. He had thought his uncle was looking out for him. He had thought Marcus saw potential in him. So he enlisted. He left. Now looking at Marcus's calculating eyes, Malik realized the truth. It hit him with the force of a physical blow. Marcus had not wanted Malik to find glory. Marcus had wanted Malik gone. He knew that if Malik stayed, he would bond with Big Papa. He would learn the business. He would become the natural heir. By sending Malik away to war, Marcus had cleared the board. He had removed the protector so that Dante and Otis could move in and manipulate the old couple. It was a betrayal so deep and so calculated that it made Malik's hands shake. The man he had viewed as a mentor was nothing more than a saboteur. So sad, Marcus said, releasing Malik. He walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a crystal vase. He turned it over to check the maker's mark. But we must be strong. We must think about the future. These assets need to be managed properly. Before Malik could respond, the screen door slammed open again. Dante walked in. Dante was wearing sunglasses inside the house. He wore designer jeans and a t-shirt that was too tight across his chest. He did not look sad. He looked energized. He walked with a swagger that suggested he already owned the deed to the land. "What is up, little brother?" Dante said to Malik. He did not offer a hug. He walked past Malik and headed straight for the liquor cabinet. He grabbed a bottle of Big Papa's rare bourbon. Dante, that was his special bottle, Malik said quietly. He saved that for anniversaries. Dante laughed. He popped the cork and took a swig straight from the bottle. Well, he is not going to be drinking it anymore, is he? To the victor go the spoils. Buster, the old coonhound that had belonged to Big Papa, was sleeping on his rug by the fireplace. The dog was deaf and arthritic. He did not hear Dante approach. Dante tripped slightly over the dog's paw. "Move, you useless mutt," Dante snapped. He kicked the dog in the ribs. It was not a gentle nudge. It was a kick. Buster yelped in pain and scrambled to his feet, his claws clicking frantically on the hardwood. He cowered in the corner, shaking. Something inside Malik snapped. The discipline of the Marine Corps was the only thing that kept him from breaking his brother's jaw. He took a step forward, his hands curled into fists. The air in the room became electric with violence. "Touch the dog again," Malik whispered, "and I will break your leg." Dante turned around. He saw the look in Malik's eyes. It was a look of absolute lethality. Dante laughed nervously and took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, soldier boy. It is just a dog. We are going to get rid of it anyway. Mom is allergic." Malik looked at the three men in the room, his father, his brother, his uncle. They were standing in the house that love had built, and they were sucking the oxygen out of it. They were not family. They were an infestation. The funeral was held at the Greater Hope Baptist Church. It was a massive brick building that sat on the edge of town. The parking lot was overflowing. Hundreds of people had come to pay their respects. There were drivers from the logistics company with their hats in their hands. There were farmers who Big Papa had helped during drought years. There were women who Big Mama had baked cakes for. The air inside the church was thick with humidity and the smell of lilies. Funeral fans waved rhythmically in the pews, creating a sea of motion. Malik sat in the front row, but he sat on the far end. He put a measurable distance between himself and the rest of the Washington clan. Otis sat in the center. He was flanked by Viola and Dante. Viola was wearing a black dress with a veil that was dramatic and oversized. She sobbed loudly into a handkerchief every few minutes. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. The pastor finished his sermon and invited the family to speak. Otis stood up. He buttoned his jacket and walked to the pulpit. He gripped the microphone with both hands. He looked out at the crowd. "My father was a great man," Otis began. His voice boomed through the speakers. "He built an empire from dirt. He was a titan of industry. And I remember when he told me, 'Son, one day all of this will be yours. One day you will take legacy haulage to the next level.'" Malik stared at the floor. It was a lie. Big Papa had never said that. Big Papa had spent the last 10 years trying to keep Otis away from the checkbook. But Otis continued. He did not tell stories about Jeremiah's kindness. He did not talk about Hattie's charity. He talked about the business. He talked about expansion. He talked about the future. It was not a eulogy. It was a shareholder presentation. "We will honor him by growing his wealth," Otis declared. "We will honor him by making the Washington name synonymous with power." The congregation murmured polite amens, but Malik could feel the discomfort in the room. The employees knew the truth. They knew Otis was a gambler and a fool. Otis finished and sat down. He looked satisfied. He looked like a man who had just cemented his claim to the throne. The choir began to sing a slow hymn. Under the cover of the music, Malik saw Viola lean over to Dante. She wiped her eyes, but her face was dry. "Did you call the dealership?" she whispered. Malik's hearing was sharp. He could hear the whisper clearly over the singing. "Yeah," Dante whispered back. "They have the Black S-Class on hold. As soon as the check clears on Tuesday, I am picking it up." "And the house," Viola whispered. "The one in Highland Park." Dante nodded. "Dad is meeting the realtor tomorrow. We are getting out of that dump we live in now." Malik sat motionless. His body was rigid. He looked at the casket covered in white roses. Inside that box lay the woman who had taught him to pray and the man who had taught him to be a man. They were not even in the ground yet. The dirt had not yet covered them. And here sat their daughter-in-law and their grandson dividing up the loot like pirates after a raid. He looked around the church. He saw the faces of the family members. He saw Marcus checking his watch in the second row. He saw cousins who had never visited the ranch whispering about how much the land was worth. Malik realized then that he was entirely alone. The realization was not sad. It was clarifying. It was like the moment before a firefight when the fear evaporates and only the mission remains. He was not a grandson anymore. He was a soldier stationed at the last outpost. These people were not his blood. They were hostiles. They were wolves in cheap suits and designer dresses. They thought the sheep were dead. They thought the gate was open. They thought they could feast. But they had forgotten one thing. The old man had left a sheepdog behind, and this dog had teeth. Malik closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He let the grief settle into a hard, cold knot in his stomach. He would mourn them later. He would cry for them when the war was over. Right now, he had a job to do. He opened his eyes and fixed his gaze on the back of Dante's head. Let them buy their cars. Let them plan their mansions. They were walking into a minefield and they did not even know it. The law offices of Elijah Stone were located in a restored brownstone in the historic district of downtown Dallas. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and old leather bindings. It was a space designed to intimidate. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal volumes that dated back decades. In the center of the room sat a massive mahogany conference table that looked heavy enough to withstand a siege. Malik arrived 15 minutes early. He wore a charcoal suit and a black tie. He sat at the far end of the table with his back to the window. He wanted to see them come in. He wanted to see their faces before they had a chance to put on their masks. Elijah Stone sat at the head of the table. He was a man of 70 with skin the color of obsidian and a shock of silver hair. He adjusted his spectacles and nodded at Malik. There was no smile. This was not a social call. "Are you ready for this, son?" Elijah asked. His voice was a low rumble like distant thunder. "I have been ready since I was 15, Malik replied. At exactly 10 o'clock, the heavy oak doors swung open. The Washington clan spilled into the room. Otis led the way, looking flushed and impatient. Viola followed, clutching a designer handbag as if it contained the Holy Grail. Dante and Marcus brought up the rear, whispering to each other with the conspiratorial air of thieves planning a heist. They stopped dead when they saw Malik. "Why is he here?" Otis demanded, pointing a finger at his son. "I thought this was a reading for the beneficiaries." Elijah Stone did not look up from his papers. "Sit down, Otis. Mr. Washington is here because he is a named party in the documents." Otis sneered but pulled out a chair. "Fine. Let us get this over with. I have a meeting with the bank at noon to discuss the estate transfer." The family settled in. Otis sat to the right of Elijah, asserting his dominance. Viola sat next to him. Dante and Marcus took the opposite side. They glared at Malik, who sat alone at the foot of the table like a judge in silent deliberation. Elijah Stone cleared his throat. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. He opened a thick leather folder and placed a single document on the table. "I am reading the last will and testament of Jeremiah and Hattie Washington," Elijah began. "This document was updated and notarized 24 months ago." 24 months, Marcus interrupted. His eyes narrowed instantly. "I thought the will was from 2010. "It was updated," Elijah said firmly. "Silence, please." He began to read. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. He read through the minor bequests first. $5,000 to the local church, $10,000 to the Employee Scholarship Fund, a collection of vintage hats to a cousin in Houston. Otis tapped his fingers on the table. "Skip to the assets, Elijah. The land, the company, the accounts." Elijah paused. He looked over the rim of his glasses at Otis. Then he looked at Viola, then at Dante. Finally, his eyes rested on Malik. Article 5. Elijah read, "Regarding the primary estate, including the 500 acres of ranch land, the entirety of the shares in Legacy Haulage, the residential properties, and all liquid cash assets held in the primary accounts, totaling an estimated value of $42 million. The room went deathly silent. Dante leaned forward, licking his lips. Viola stopped breathing. "I, Jeremiah Washington, being of sound mind, leave the entirety of this estate to a single beneficiary." Otis started to stand up, a smile forming on his lips. "Thank you, Papa," he whispered. "To my grandson," Elijah continued, his voice rising slightly. "Malik Washington." The silence shattered. It was not a gradual break. It was an explosion. Otis jumped up from his chair so fast that it toppled over backward with a loud crash. What Otis screamed. His face turned a deep shade of purple. "That is impossible. That is a lie. You are reading it wrong." Elijah did not flinch. He turned the document around and slid it across the mahogany table. The name was there in bold black ink, Malik Washington. Viola let out a wail that sounded more like a siren than a cry of grief. "My baby," she sobbed. "My baby took everything. How could you do this to your mother?" Dante slammed his fist onto the table. "This is bullshit. He manipulated them. He was always sneaking around over there, whispering poison in their ears." Marcus remained seated, but his face had gone pale. His eyes were cold and calculating. He looked at Elijah. "This will not stand," Marcus said quietly. "We will contest this." Jeremiah was senile. He was 80 years old. He did not know what he was signing. We will prove that he was mentally incompetent and that Malik used undue influence to coerce him. Malik sat perfectly still. He watched them unravel. He watched the greed strip away the last layers of their humanity. They were not mourning the loss of their parents. They were mourning the loss of their lottery ticket. Elijah Stone reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a second file. It was thick and bound with red tape. I anticipated this objection, Elijah said. He placed the file on the table. What is that? Otis barked. This is a comprehensive medical evaluation of both Jeremiah and Hattie Washington, Elijah explained calmly. It was conducted on the same day they signed this will. It includes cognitive tests from 3 independent neurologists. It includes video interviews where they state their intentions clearly. Elijah opened the file and pointed to a paragraph. Here is the summary from Dr. Evans. It states that Jeremiah Washington possessed a sharp and unimpaired intellect. It explicitly notes that he discussed his disappointment with his son Otis and his brother Marcus regarding their financial irresponsibility. Otis froze. The color drained from his face. He said that Otis whispered. He said more. Elijah continued. He said that he loved you, but he could not trust you. He said that giving you this money would be like handing a loaded gun to a child. He wanted to protect the legacy, and he believed Malik was the only one who could do it. Viola stopped crying abruptly. She looked at Malik. Her eyes were wide with betrayal. You knew, she hissed. You sat there at the funeral, and you knew you had stolen our future. I did not steal anything, Malik said. His voice was calm, but it cut through the room like a knife. They gave it to me, because they knew I would build something with it. They knew you would just spend it. Dante lunged across the table. He grabbed Malik by the lapels of his jacket. You think you are smart, Dante spat. You think you won. I will ruin you. I will drag your name through the mud until you wish you were dead. Malik did not blink. He did not struggle. He simply looked at Dante's hands gripping his suit. Get your hands off me, Malik said softly, or you will leave this room in handcuffs. Elijah pressed a button under the table. 2 large security guards entered the room from the side door. They were former linebackers and they looked ready for a fight. Dante released Malik and stepped back. He smoothed his shirt, trying to regain some shred of dignity. We are leaving, Otis announced. He glared at Elijah. We will see you in court. I will hire the best lawyers in the state. We will overturn this. Good luck, Elijah said dryly. You will need it. The family stormed out of the room. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. Malik exhaled slowly. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at the empty chairs where his family had just sat. They were gone. The bridge was burned. There was no going back now. Elijah Stone waited until the elevator doors down the hall had dinged shut before he spoke again. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The stern mask of the lawyer dropped for a moment, revealing the tired face of an old friend. They are going to come for you, Malik Elijah said. They are wounded animals now, and wounded animals bite. I know, Malik replied. He reached for the glass of water on the table. His hand was steady. Elijah opened a drawer in the conference table and pulled out another stack of documents. These were bound in blue leather. This is the second part of Jeremiah's plan, Elijah said. The will gives you the ownership, but this document gives you the protection. Malik leaned forward. What is it? It is an asset protection trust, Elijah explained. We set this up 3 years ago. Technically, you do not own the $42 million directly. The trust owns it. You are the sole beneficiary and the sole trustee, but you are bound by the rules of the trust. Elijah opened the document to the first page. The rules are strict. Elijah continued. You cannot sell the land. You cannot sell the majority shares of Legacy Haulage. You cannot liquidate the assets for cash unless it is for the specific purpose of business expansion or charitable work. Malik frowned. Why did he do that? Did he not trust me either? Elijah smiled a small, sad smile. He trusted you implicitly. This was not to stop you from spending the money. This was to stop you from giving it to them. Malik felt a chill run down his spine as the realization hit him. If Otis comes to you begging for money, Elijah said, if Viola cries about her health, if Dante threatens you, it does not matter. You can look them in the eye and tell them the truth. You cannot give them a dime. The trust forbids it. If you try to withdraw cash to pay off Otis's gambling debts, the Board of Overseers will block it. It takes the weapon out of your hand. It saves you from your own guilt. Malik sat back in his chair. He felt a wave of overwhelming gratitude. Big Papa had known. He had known that Malik's one weakness was his desire to help. He had known that eventually Malik might break under the pressure of his mother's tears. So he had built a wall that even Malik could not climb. "He protected me," Malik whispered. "Even from the grave, he is protecting me." The door to the side office opened, and Mr. Silas walked in. The old housekeeper was carrying a small metal box. He walked over to Malik and placed it on the table. Mr. Silas looked older today. The grief was etched into the lines around his mouth. But his eyes were clear. "He wanted you to have this," Mr. Silas said. Malik opened the box. Inside lay a black leather-bound diary and a silver USB drive. "What is this?" Malik asked. Mr. Silas pulled out a chair and sat down. "This is the ledger of sins, Mr. Malik. Your grandfather was a kind man, but he was not a fool. He saw everything. Every time your father stole from the petty cash. Every time your Uncle Marcus tried to manipulate the stock options. Every time your brother lied about his tuition money." Malik picked up the diary. The leather was worn and soft. He opened it to a random page. The handwriting was shaky but legible. October 12, 2018. Otis came today. Asked for $5,000 for a car repair. Later I saw him at the casino on the reservation. He lost it all in 2 hours. My heart breaks for him. He is lost. Malik turned the page. July 4th, 2019. Dante visited. He stole the silver candlesticks from the dining room while Hattie was cooking. He thought we did not see. We said nothing. We just prayed for him. Malik felt a physical pain in his chest. It was a sharp ache that made it hard to breathe. He read entry after entry. Years of betrayal. Years of theft. They had treated the old couple like a bank vault that they could rob whenever they pleased. And Big Papa and Big Mama had just taken it. They had absorbed the pain in silence because they did not want to shame their children. He looked up at Mr. Silas. There were tears in his eyes. "They knew," Malik said. His voice cracked. "They knew everything." "They did." Mr. Silas nodded. "And it broke their hearts. That is why they chose you. They saw how you lived. They saw that you never asked for anything. You just came to fix the tractor. You came to eat pie. You came to be with them." Malik closed the book. The sadness in his chest began to harden. It cooled and solidified into something heavy and cold. It was no longer grief. It was iron. He looked at the USB drive. "And this?" Malik asked. "Video evidence," Mr. Silas said. "Security footage from the house. Recordings of phone calls. If they try to sue you. If they try to lie to the press. You play this." Malik closed his hand around the drive. It felt cold against his palm. This was the ammunition. This was the nuclear option. "Thank you, Silas," Malik said. He stood up. He felt different than he had when he entered the room an hour ago. He felt heavier. The weight of the legacy was now resting squarely on his shoulders, but he also felt stronger. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the two old people who had sat in that ranch house and watched their own children rob them blind. "I am going to the farm," Malik said. "I will go with you," Mr. Silas said. "No," Malik shook his head. "Go home, Silas. Rest. I need to do this alone tonight." He walked out of the office and into the bright Dallas sunlight. But inside his heart, it was already winter. The drive to the ranch took an hour, but Malik did not remember any of it. His truck seemed to drive itself, guided by muscle memory. When he arrived, the sun had already set. The ranch house stood silhouetted against a dark purple sky. It looked massive and imposing. Malik unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was still. It smelled of dust and memories. He did not turn on the lights. He preferred the darkness. He walked through the living room, guiding himself by the moonlight spilling through the windows. He walked past the spot where Dante had kicked the dog. He walked past the dining table where they had shared so many Thanksgiving meals. The house felt empty in a way that was almost physical. It was as if the soul of the building had departed with its owners. Malik walked into Big Papa's study. It was a room lined with books and filled with the scent of pipe tobacco. He sat down in the large leather armchair behind the desk. The leather creaked under his weight. He looked around the room. On the wall hung a framed map of the property. 500 acres. It was a kingdom, and he was the king. But there was no joy in the coronation. He thought about the phrase he had heard so many times, "Heavy is the head that wears the crown." He had always thought it was just a saying. Now he felt the truth of it. The crown was not made of gold. It was made of responsibility. It was made of difficult choices. It was made of the terrible knowledge that to protect the kingdom, he had to destroy his own kin. He leaned back and closed his eyes. He could hear the wind whistling through the eaves of the house. It sounded like a mournful song. "Am I doing the right thing?" he whispered to the empty room. There was no answer. But in his mind, he saw the diary again. He saw the entry about the stolen candlesticks. He saw his grandmother's face. He opened his eyes. The doubt vanished. He was not doing this for himself. He was doing it for justice. He opened the bottom drawer of the desk. Inside lay an old revolver. It was a Smith & Wesson .38 Special. The metal was worn and the wood grip was smooth from years of handling. It was the gun Big Papa had carried when he drove trucks at night in the 60s to protect himself from hijackers. Malik took the gun out. He checked the cylinder. It was empty. He reached into the box of ammunition beside it. He took out 6 bullets. They were cold and heavy. He loaded the first bullet. For the disrespect, he loaded the second bullet. For the theft, he loaded the third bullet. For the lies, he loaded the fourth bullet. For the betrayal, he loaded the fifth bullet. For the greed, he loaded the sixth bullet. For the legacy, he snapped the cylinder shut. The sound was a loud metallic click that echoed in the silent house. It was a sound of finality. Malik placed the gun on the desk in front of him. He did not intend to shoot his family. He was not a murderer. But the gun was a symbol. It was a message to the universe and to himself. The time for peace was over. The time for turning the other cheek was gone. He was the patriarch now. He was the guardian of the gate. And if the wolves came scratching at the door, they would find that the sheepdog was gone. In his place sat a lion. Malik stared at the gun gleaming in the moonlight. He waited for the morning. He waited for the war. The war did not begin with a shout. It began with the hiss of escaping air and the screech of metal on asphalt. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday when Malik received the call. He was asleep in the guest bedroom of the ranch house, having moved there permanently to stand guard over the estate. The phone rang once and he was awake. His military training kicked in, instantly clearing the fog of sleep from his brain. He picked up the device and saw the name of his fleet manager on the screen. "Boss, we have a problem," the manager said. His voice was tight with panic. "What is it?" Malik asked, sitting up and reaching for his jeans. "Truck number 42. It just blew 2 tires on Interstate 20. The driver is safe, but he says it looks intentional. And boss, we have 3 other rigs in the yard that refuse to start. Sugar in the gas tanks." Malik felt a cold calm wash over him. This was it. The legal threats had failed. The emotional manipulation had failed. Now they were resorting to physical sabotage. They were trying to bleed the company dry to force a sale. "Secure the yard," Malik ordered. "Do not let anyone in or out. Call the tow trucks for the stranded driver. I am on my way." He drove to the Legacy Haulage Depot in silence. The moon was high and bright, illuminating the flat Texas landscape. When he arrived, the yard was bathed in the harsh yellow glow of floodlights. The smell of diesel and frustration hung in the air. His drivers were standing in a cluster near the mechanic's bay, talking in low, angry voices. These were men who had worked for Big Papa for 20 years. They were men with families and mortgages. They depended on these trucks to put food on the table. Malik walked over to truck number 42, which had just been towed in. The massive rubber tires were shredded. He knelt down and inspected the sidewall. It was not a blowout caused by wear and tear. There were distinct puncture marks. Someone had driven spikes into the sidewalls, likely while the truck was parked at the rest stop an hour earlier. He walked to the other disabled trucks. The mechanics had already drained the fuel tanks. A pile of white sludge sat on the concrete floor. Sugar. It was a crude and amateurish tactic, but it was effective. It would cost thousands of dollars to repair the engines and even more in missed delivery penalties. "This is sabotage," the foreman growled. "Who would do this to us?" Malik knew exactly who. He did not say the name out loud. He did not want to involve his employees in a family blood feud. "Get them fixed," Malik said quietly. "I will cover the overtime pay. Just get them back on the road." He walked into the main office and locked the door. He sat down at the security terminal. Iron Shield had installed a new perimeter system just 2 days ago, but he had kept it offline to test it. He realized now that he should have activated it sooner. He pulled up the footage from the previous night. He watched the grainy black and white video. At 2 a.m, a dark sedan pulled up to the back fence. 3 figures jumped out. They were wearing hoodies and masks. They moved with the chaotic energy of amateurs. One of them was too heavy to climb the fence easily and fell onto the pavement. Malik zoomed in. The figure pulled down his mask for a split second to wipe sweat from his face. The face was grainy, but unmistakable. It was not Dante. Dante was too cowardly to get his hands dirty. It was one of Dante's old friends from high school, a man named Tyrell who had been in and out of county jail for petty theft. Malik watched as they poured sugar into the tanks. He watched them slash the tires of the parked trailers. He saved the video file. He copied it to 3 separate secure servers. His finger hovered over the button to call the police. This was a felony. He could have Tyrell arrested within the hour, and Tyrell would flip on Dante in a heartbeat to save his own skin. But Malik did not make the call. Not yet. He sat back in the chair. If he arrested them now, Dante would claim ignorance. Otis would claim it was a misunderstanding. They would play the victim card. He needed more. He needed to let them think they were winning. He needed them to get sloppy. Malik closed the laptop. He would use this footage, but he would use it as a finishing move, not an opening jab. He was fighting a guerrilla war now, and in guerrilla warfare you let the enemy extend their lines until they were exposed and vulnerable. The sabotage was only the first front of the attack. The second front was psychological, and it hurt far more than the damaged trucks. 2 days later, Malik drove into town to get a haircut. He went to the same barbershop he had been going to since he was a boy. It was a place called Fade Masters. It was the cultural hub of the local black community. It was where politics were discussed and news was shared. When Malik walked in, the shop was buzzing with conversation. The air smelled of talcum powder and bay rum. But the moment the door closed behind him, the conversation died. Silence rippled through the room. 5 men looked at him. The barber, Mr. Jenkins, stopped his clippers mid-stroke. Malik ignored the tension. He walked to the empty chair and sat down. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins," Malik said. "Just a trim today." Mr. Jenkins hesitated. He looked at the other men in the shop. He looked uncomfortable. "I am booked up today, Malik," Mr. Jenkins mumbled. "In fact, I am booked up for the whole week." Malik looked around the empty waiting area. There was no one waiting. The rejection was blatant. "I see," Malik said slowly. A man sitting in the corner spoke up. It was Deacon Jones from the church. He was an elder in the community, a man Malik had respected all his life. "You should not be here, son," Deacon Jones said. His voice was heavy with judgment. "Excuse me?" Malik asked. "We heard what you did," Deacon Jones continued. "We heard how you tricked your grandfather. We heard how you locked your own mother out of her house. A man who does not honor his parents is not welcome here." Malik felt a flush of heat rise in his neck. Otis and Marcus had been busy. They had launched a whisper campaign. They knew they could not win in court, so they were trying to destroy him in the court of public opinion. They were painting him as the villain, the greedy grandson, the sellout. "That is not the truth," Malik said, keeping his voice steady. "My grandfather wanted to protect the legacy. He knew my father would gamble it away." Deacon Jones shook his head. "That is your father, boy. You do not air family laundry in public. You do not leave your kin destitute while you sit on a fortune. It is shameful. You have forgotten where you came from. You think because you have that fancy security company and that white man's lawyer, you are better than us." The words cut deep. They struck at the core of Malik's identity. He had spent his life trying to build something that would uplift his family name. He had employed dozens of people from this very neighborhood, and now because of the lies of 2 greedy men, he was being cast out. He stood up. He looked at Mr. Jenkins. He looked at Deacon Jones. "I have not forgotten anything," Malik said. "I am the only one remembering what Big Papa actually stood for. He stood for integrity, not handouts." He turned and walked out of the shop. As the door closed, he heard the conversation start up again. He heard the word sellout whispered loud enough for him to hear. He walked to his truck. His hands were shaking not from fear but from a profound sense of isolation. This was the unique pain of the black man who tries to break the cycle of poverty. When you climb out of the barrel, the other crabs do not just try to pull you back in. They try to tear off your legs. He sat in his truck and gripped the steering wheel. He wanted to scream. He wanted to drive to his parents' rental house and confront them. He wanted to ask them how they could sleep at night knowing they were poisoning the community against their own son. But he knew the answer. They slept fine, because to them, he was not a son. He was an obstacle, and obstacles were meant to be removed. He started the engine. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. If the community wanted to turn its back on him, so be it. He would stand alone. He returned to the ranch in the late afternoon. The house was quiet. Mr. Silas was in the library dusting the bookshelves. The old man looked up when Malik entered. He saw the pain in Malik's eyes. He saw the slump in his shoulders. "They got to you, didn't they?" Mr. Silas asked softly. Malik nodded. He poured himself a glass of water and drank it in one long gulp. "They have turned the town against me, Silas, even Deacon Jones. They think I'm a monster." Mr. Silas sighed. He put down his feather duster. He walked over to the heavy iron safe in the corner of the room. "A lie travels halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes," Mr. Silas quoted. "But the truth always catches up." He spun the dial on the safe. Click, click, click. The heavy door swung open. Mr. Silas reached into the back and pulled out a small velvet box. Malik recognized it immediately. It was the box for Big Papa's gold watch, the Patek Philippe that had been a gift from a grateful client 30 years ago. It was the watch that Otis had stolen and pawned and that Malik had to buy back twice. "I thought this was missing," Malik said. "It was," Mr. Silas said. "Your father took it the day of the funeral. He returned it yesterday by courier. I suppose he thought returning a few items would make him look good in the eyes of the mediator." Malik took the box. It felt heavy. He opened it. The watch gleamed on the velvet cushion. It was a beautiful piece of machinery. But something looked wrong. The velvet lining of the box was slightly askew. "It looks tampered with," Malik observed. Mr. Silas nodded. "I noticed that too. Big Papa used to hide things in here. Notes, cash." Malik pulled at the loose edge of the velvet lining. It came away easily. Underneath the cushion, nestled in the hollow space of the box, was a small black device. It was a digital voice recorder. Malik frowned. Big Papa used this to dictate letters. "Why is it in here?" Mr. Silas looked grave. "I think he wanted it to be found. Or maybe your father hid it there years ago and forgot about it. Or maybe it was recording when he stole the watch." Malik pressed the play button. The device crackled. There was the sound of fabric rustling. Then a voice cut through the static. It was Otis. "Hurry up, Marcus. The old man is coming back from the barn." Then Marcus's voice, smooth and arrogant. "Relax, brother." He walked slow. "Look at this watch. This will fetch $5,000 easy at the pawn shop downtown." Malik's stomach twisted. The recording was dated 2 weeks before the plane crash. This was not an old memory. This was recent. $5,000 is peanuts," Otis said. "I am talking about the big picture. When that plane goes down, when they pass away, we are sitting on a gold mine." Malik froze. His blood ran cold. "When that plane goes down." It was likely a figure of speech, a slip of the tongue, but the malice in the voice was undeniable. "We sell the land immediately," Marcus said. "I have a developer in Houston ready to pay cash. We flatten the house. We flatten the barns. We put up condos." "And the bodies?" Otis asked. "What about the funeral?" Marcus laughed. It was a cruel, cold sound. "Why spend money on a fancy plot in the family cemetery? Dump them in the county pauper's field. Who cares? They will be dead. They won't know the difference. We save the insurance money for ourselves." And Malik, Otis asked, "He will be a problem." "Malik is a soldier," Marcus scoffed. "He is a grunt. We will give him $10,000 and tell him to go play security guard. If he fights us, we will ruin him. We will tell everyone he abused the old couple. We will destroy his reputation until he has to leave town in shame." The recording ended with a click. Malik sat there frozen in time. The silence in the library was deafening. He felt a sensation he had never felt before. It was not anger. It was not betrayal. It was horror. He had always thought his family was just greedy. He thought they were weak men addicted to easy money. But this was different. This was evil. They had planned to desecrate his grandparents' bodies to save a few $1,000s. They had planned to erase the entire legacy, bulldoze the home, and sell the land for condos. And they had planned to destroy Malik's life with cold calculation. He looked up at Mr. Silas. The old man was crying silently. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. "They are monsters," Silas whispered. Malik stood up. He placed the recorder in his pocket. His hands were no longer shaking. His heart was beating with a slow, steady rhythm. The conflict in his soul was over. There was no more doubt. There was no more guilt about filial piety. A man does not owe loyalty to a cancer. A man cuts it out. He walked to the desk and opened his laptop. "What are you going to do?" Mr. Silas asked, wiping his eyes. Malik began to type. His fingers flew across the keys. "I am going to give them one last chance," Malik said, "not because they deserve it, but because I need to show the world who they really are. I need them to reject mercy so that when I bring the sword, no one can say I was unjust." He drafted a legal document. It was short and brutal. It stated that the family must return every single item they had stolen from the house: the silver, the paintings, the jewelry. In exchange, Malik would consider a small monthly stipend for basic living expenses provided they signed a non-disclosure agreement and stepped away from the company forever. It was a trap. He knew their egos would never allow them to accept it. They would see it as an insult. He printed the document, he signed it, he scanned it and emailed it to Otis, Dante, and Marcus. He added a simple message in the body of the email: "Return what you stole by midnight tonight, or I release everything." He hit send. He did not have to wait long. 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from Dante. Malik opened it. "Go to hell. You think you can buy us off with crumbs? I will burn that ranch to the ground with you inside it before I return a single spoon. Watch your back." Malik stared at the screen. "I will burn that ranch to the ground." It was a threat of arson. It was a threat of murder. And it was in writing. Malik picked up the landline phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. Elijah Stone answered on the second ring. Elijah, Malik said. His voice was devoid of emotion. "It is time." "You are sure?" Elijah asked. "I am sure. Initiate the lawsuits, file the restraining orders, and call the district attorney. I have evidence of conspiracy and grand larceny." He hung up and dialed a second number. "Sheriff Ramirez." Malik Ramirez answered. "I need you to send a patrol car to the ranch," Malik said, "and I need you to get a warrant for the arrest of Dante Washington." "On what grounds?" Ramirez asked. "Terroristic threats and conspiracy to commit arson," Malik said. "And Sheriff, bring backup. I have a feeling they are coming here tonight." He hung up the phone. He looked at Mr. Silas. "Go to the safe room, Silas. Lock the door. Do not come out until I come for you." "But what about you?" Mr. Silas asked, fear in his eyes. Malik walked to the gun cabinet. He unlocked it and took out a tactical shotgun. He checked the safety. "I am going to sit on the porch," Malik said. "I am going to turn on every light in the house, and I am going to wait." He walked out onto the front porch. The night air was hot and heavy. The crickets were singing in the tall grass. Malik sat in Big Papa's rocking chair. He laid the shotgun across his lap. He was not afraid. He was liberated. The invisible man was gone. The grandson was gone. The only thing left was the warrior. He looked down the long, dusty road that led to the main gate. He watched the darkness. "Come on," he whispered to the night. "Come and take it." The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the Texas sky a bruised purple color. Inside the main security room of the ranch house, Malik Washington stood before a wall of monitors. The silence of the room was broken only by the hum of the cooling fans and the erratic static coming from the exterior microphones. He was not alone. Mr. Silas stood in the corner clutching a rosary. Two of Malik's best men from Iron Shield were stationed by the back door. They were dressed in tactical black gear and stood with their arms crossed. "They are here," Mr. Silas whispered. Malik looked at the central screen. A convoy of 3 vehicles had stopped just outside the main iron gate. Otis's luxury sedan was in the lead. Behind him was Dante's flashy sports car, and behind that was a white van with a satellite dish mounted on the roof. "They brought the circus," Malik muttered. He zoomed the camera in. Otis hopped out of the car. He was screaming. He waved his arms at the security camera mounted on the stone pillar. He looked deranged. His tie was undone and his face was slick with sweat. Beside him, Viola stumbled out of the passenger seat. She walked a few steps toward the gate and then collapsed onto the dusty ground. "Help me!" Otis screamed, his voice distorting over the audio feed. "My wife is dying. She's having a heart attack. Malik, you ungrateful bastard, open the gate. Your mother is dying right here in the dirt." A cameraman jumped out of the white van. He rushed forward with a large camera on his shoulder. A reporter with a microphone stood right next to Otis, pointing at the closed gate and speaking rapidly into the lens. They were live streaming. They were broadcasting this theater to the entire city of Dallas. Malik watched the screen with the cold detachment of a sniper. He saw the performance for what it was. Otis was playing the desperate husband. Viola was playing the martyr. "Is she really sick?" Mr. Silas asked, his voice trembling. "Should we call 911? Malik reached for the control console. He adjusted the zoom on camera 2. The lens focused tightly on Viola lying on the ground. She was clutching her chest and moaning, but then Malik saw it. A fly landed on her forehead. In a split second, Viola raised her hand, shooed the fly away, and quickly adjusted her wig to make sure it was straight before resuming her pose of agony. "She is fine," Malik said. His voice was ice. "She is worried about her hair." The reporter outside thrust the microphone into Otis's face. "Mr. Washington, is your son refusing to let emergency services in?" the reporter asked. "He is a monster," Otis yelled at the camera. "He stole our inheritance and now he wants us dead." Malik felt a surge of disgust. They were weaponizing his mother's health to force him into a public relations nightmare. If he kept the gate closed, he looked like a patricidal maniac. If he opened it, he let the enemy inside the wire. But Malik had prepared for this. He knew they would try a frontal assault. He had turned the living room into a kill zone, not for bullets, but for the truth. "Call an ambulance," Malik ordered one of his guards. "Tell them we have a woman complaining of chest pains at the front gate." He turned back to the console. He pressed the intercom button. His voice boomed out of the speaker at the gate, startling Otis. "I am opening the gate," Malik said. "Bring her inside." Otis looked at the camera with a triumphant sneer. He helped Viola to her feet. She leaned heavily on him, still feigning weakness, but moving with surprising speed toward the car. The heavy iron gates groaned as they swung open. The convoy drove through tires crunching on the gravel. They drove fast, heading straight for the main house. "They think they have won," Malik said to Mr. Silas. "They think I capitulated to the pressure." He walked out of the security room and headed for the main hall. He checked his tie in the mirror. He adjusted his cuffs. He did not look like a man under siege. He looked like a prosecutor walking into a courtroom. "Let them come," Malik whispered. "They are walking right into the trap." The front door of the ranch house burst open. Otis strode in first, dragging Viola, who was still whimpering dramatically. Dante followed close behind with his phone raised, recording everything for his social media followers. The news crew from the white van crowded into the doorway, their camera lights blindingly bright in the dim hallway. "Where is he?" Otis shouted. "Where is the coward who hides behind fences?" "We are in the living room," Malik called out from the back. The family rushed into the spacious living room, expecting to find Malik alone and cowering. They expected to corner him and force him to sign the checks on live television. Instead, they stopped dead in their tracks. The living room was not empty. It was arranged like a tribunal. Seated on the leather sofa was Sheriff Ramirez in his full uniform, his hat resting on his knee. Next to him sat Elijah Stone, the lawyer, with a stack of files on his lap. Standing by the fireplace were 2 reporters from the Dallas Morning News and a national investigative journalist Malik had contacted 2 days ago. They had their notebooks open and their pens ready, and in the center of the room stood Malik. He stood next to a large flat-screen television that was connected to his laptop. "What is this?" Otis stammered. He looked at the sheriff. "Sheriff, arrest him. He is abusing the elderly. My wife needs a doctor." "Sit down," Otis Sheriff Ramirez said. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of the law. "The ambulance is 5 minutes away. Until then, you will sit." Viola, seeing the sheriff, suddenly seemed to regain some of her strength. She let go of Otis and sank onto an armchair, looking around nervously. The cameraman from the van lowered his camera, unsure of what was happening. "Keep rolling," Malik said to the news crew. "You wanted a story about the Washington legacy. I am going to give you the exclusive." He pressed a key on his laptop. The large screen flared to life. "This is video footage from 3 nights ago," Malik announced. The screen showed the grainy black and white video of the Legacy haulage truck depot. It showed the 3 figures climbing the fence. It zoomed in on the face of the man who fell. Dante gasped. "That is Tyrell." "Yes," Malik said, looking at his brother. "That is your best friend, Tyrell. And here he is pouring sugar into the gas tanks of the trucks that Big Papa bought." The video switched to a recorded interrogation. It was Tyrell sitting in a police interview room. Sheriff Ramirez had picked him up an hour ago. "Dante told us to do it," Tyrell said on the screen. He said if we wrecked the trucks, Malik would have to sell the company. He promised us $5,000 each. Dante's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He dropped his phone. "That is a lie," Dante shouted. "He is lying." Malik did not argue. He pressed another key. "And this is the financial reality of my father, Otis Washington," Malik said. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. It was a detailed list of gambling debts from 3 different casinos and 5 known loan sharks. The total was over $200,000. "You told the community I was keeping the money for myself," Malik said, addressing the reporters in the room. "But the truth is my father owes money to criminals. If I gave him the estate, it would be gone in a month." Otis was shaking. "Stop this. This is private. You have no right." Malik ignored him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder he had found in the watch box. And finally Malik said, "For those who think I manipulated my grandparents into changing the will, let us hear what my father and uncle really thought of them." He held the recorder up to the microphone connected to the speakers. He pressed play. The room went silent. The only sound was the crackling recording. "Dump them in the county pauper's field. Who cares? They will be dead. They won't know the difference." The voice was unmistakable. It was Uncle Marcus, who was currently hiding in Chicago, but his malice filled the room. Then Otis's voice rang out. "And Malik, we will ruin him. We will tell everyone he abused the old couple." The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The reporters were typing furiously. The cameraman was zooming in on Otis's face. Viola had stopped moaning entirely. She stared at the floor, her face burning with shame. Sheriff Ramirez stood up. He walked over to Dante. "Dante Washington," the sheriff said, "I have a warrant for your arrest for conspiracy to commit felony vandalism and insurance fraud." He pulled out his handcuffs. The metal clicked as he secured Dante's wrists. "Mom, help me," Dante cried. "Do not let them take me." Viola did not move. She could not move. The weight of the truth pinned her to the chair. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut seemed to snap the last thread of Otis's sanity. He looked at his son being arrested. He looked at the reporters documenting his humiliation. He looked at Malik standing there with the laptop like a judge delivering a death sentence. "You did this," Otis screamed. He lunged across the room. It was a clumsy and desperate attack. He swung his fist at Malik's face. Malik did not flinch. He did not have to. Before Otis could get within striking distance, the 2 Iron Shield guards stepped out of the shadows. They moved with synchronized precision. One grabbed Otis's arm and twisted it behind his back. The other forced him down onto his knees. "Let him go," Malik ordered softly. The guards released Otis. He fell to the carpet panting and sobbing. He looked small. The expensive suit was rumpled. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was a broken man who had gambled everything and lost. Viola stood up. The heart attack was forgotten. The act was over. She looked at Malik with eyes that were red and swollen. "Tony," she whispered, using his childhood nickname. "Tony, please. We are your family. How can you do this to us?" Malik looked at her. He felt a pang of sadness, but he crushed it instantly. "I did not do this," Malik said. "You did this. You chose greed over blood. You chose lies over honor." He walked to the coffee table. He picked up a single sheet of paper. It was the document he had drafted earlier. "I'm going to give you one last chance," Malik said. "Not because you deserve it, but because Big Mama would have wanted me to show mercy." He held out the paper. "This is a contract," Malik explained. "It states that you will return every single item you stole from this house. The jewelry, the paintings, the silver. It states that you will publicly recant your lies about me. And it states that you will never step foot on this property or interfere with the company again." He paused, letting the terms sink in. "If you sign this, I will set up a small monthly stipend for you and Mom. It will be enough for rent and food. It will not be enough for luxury cars or gambling. It is a lifeline. Take it." Otis looked up from the floor. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at the reporters. His pride was a toxic thing. Even in defeat, he could not accept charity from the son he had despised. He stood up slowly. He snatched the paper from Malik's hand. "I do not need your crumbs," Otis spat. "I am Otis Washington. I built this family. I do not take orders from a mechanic." He ripped the paper in half. Then he ripped it again. He threw the confetti pieces at Malik's feet. "We will sue you," Otis vowed. We will find a lawyer who is not afraid of you. We will take everything." Malik watched the pieces of paper flutter to the floor. He felt a sense of finality. It was done. He had offered them a lifeboat and they had chosen to drown. "Get out," Malik said. Otis grabbed Viola's arm. "Come on, Diane. We are leaving." Viola looked back at Malik one last time. There was regret in her eyes, but she let Otis drag her away. She was too weak to stand on her own. Sheriff Ramirez led Dante out the door. Dante was weeping now, begging for a lawyer. The news crew followed them out, sensing that the drama was moving to the parking lot. Malik stood alone in the center of the living room. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was clean. The poison had been drawn out. Elijah Stone walked over and placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "You did the right thing, son," Elijah said. "I know," Malik replied. He looked down at the torn pieces of the contract. He bent down and picked up one piece. It was just paper. But it represented the end of his childhood. It represented the death of the hope that his parents would ever love him for who he was. He walked to the fireplace and tossed the scrap into the cold ashes. Mr. Silas came in from the hallway. He looked shaken, but relieved. "Are they gone?" Mr. Silas asked. "Yes," Silas Malik said. "They are gone for good." He turned to the window and looked out into the night. The taillights of the cars were fading down the long, dusty driveway. "Close the gate," Malik said, "and change the locks." The wheels of justice turned with a grinding precision that mirrored Malik's own internal state. He had filed the lawsuits the morning after the confrontation in the living room. The charges were clear: grand larceny, conspiracy to commit fraud, destruction of private property. With the video footage of Dante vandalizing the trucks and the audio recordings of Otis plotting to desecrate the graves, there was no room for defense attorneys to maneuver. The legal battle was short and brutal. It took place in a sterile courtroom in downtown Dallas. Malik sat on one side of the aisle with Elijah Stone. His family sat on the other. They looked like ghosts of their former selves. Otis wore a suit that was wrinkled and ill-fitting. His face was gaunt, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. Viola sat with her head bowed, clutching a tissue. Dante was not there. He was being held in the county detention center, awaiting his bail hearing for the felony vandalism charges. The judge was a stern woman with no patience for family drama. She reviewed the evidence in silence. The video of the sugar being poured into the gas tanks played on the courtroom monitors. The audio of Marcus joking about the pauper's grave filled the air. When the judge looked up, her eyes were cold. "This is the most appalling display of familial greed I have ever witnessed," she declared. The ruling was swift. The court ordered the immediate return of all stolen property. It ordered Otis and Viola to pay legal fees and restitution for the emotional distress caused. It issued a permanent restraining order preventing any of them from coming within 500 yards of the ranch or the Legacy Haulage offices. 2 weeks later, a white delivery van arrived at the ranch. 2 movers carried boxes into the living room. They placed them on the floor and left. Malik stood alone in the silence of the house. Mr. Silas had offered to help unpack, but Malik had refused. He needed to do this himself. He opened the first box. Inside, wrapped in layers of bubble wrap, was the pearl necklace. It was the necklace Big Mama Hattie had worn to church every Sunday for 40 years. Malik held the cool, smooth pearls in his hand. He remembered the way they used to click against her buttons when she hugged him. He walked to the master bedroom and placed the necklace on the velvet stand on her dresser. He opened the next box. It contained the oil painting of the Texas bluebonnets that Big Papa had bought at a county fair in 1975. Otis had stolen it because he thought it was by a famous artist. He had been wrong. It was worthless to a pawn shop. But to Malik, it was priceless. It was the view Big Papa loved. Malik hung the painting back on the wall above the fireplace. He adjusted it until it was perfectly straight. He worked for hours. He returned the silver candlesticks to the dining table. He put the antique clock back on the mantel. He placed the crystal vase back on the shelf. When the last box was empty, the house looked exactly as it had before the funeral. The physical scars of the theft were gone. Everything was in its place. The sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. But as Malik stood in the center of the restored room, he felt a sudden and crushing wave of grief. It started in his throat and moved down to his knees. He collapsed onto the rug. He curled into a ball and wept. He did not cry for the grandparents he had lost. He had already mourned them. He cried for the parents he never had. He cried for the little boy inside him who had waited for 15 years for his father to say good job. He cried for the teenager who had joined the Marines just to get a nod of approval from his uncle. He cried for the man who had spent 32 years trying to buy love with loyalty, only to realize that the currency was counterfeit. The victory in court was hollow. He had won the war, but the cost was his entire history. He was legally vindicated, but spiritually, he was an orphan. The people who shared his DNA were still alive, but to him, they were dead. They were strangers who had worn the faces of his family. He lay on the floor for a long time. The house was silent around him. It was a big, empty fortress. But as the tears dried, Malik felt a strange lightness. The burden of expectation was gone. He no longer had to perform. He no longer had to hope. The cord was cut. He was alone, but he was free. 6 months passed. The Texas summer faded into a crisp autumn. The leaves on the oak trees turned a brilliant shade of burnt orange. Life at the ranch had settled into a new rhythm. Iron Shield was thriving. The contract to protect the regional distribution centers had doubled Malik's revenue. Legacy haulage was also flourishing under the new management team Malik had installed. The trucks ran on time. The drivers were paid well. The morale was high. But the world outside the ranch was not so kind to the Washington clan. Otis had gambled everything on the assumption that he would win the lawsuit. He had borrowed heavily from loan sharks to pay for his legal team and to maintain his lifestyle while he waited for the settlement. When the judge ruled against him, the house of cards collapsed. Malik heard the news through the grapevine. Otis and Viola had been evicted from their rental home in Highland Park. Their leased cars had been repossessed. They were living in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. Dante had not fared any better. The district attorney had pursued the felony charges aggressively. Dante had taken a plea deal to avoid 5 years in prison. He was serving 18 months in the county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. The brains of the operation was now an inmate with a criminal record. Uncle Marcus had fled back to Chicago, but the scandal followed him. The audio recording of him conspiring to defraud the estate had leaked to his partners. He was fired from his firm and was facing an investigation by the Securities Commission. One rainy afternoon in November, the intercom at the main gate buzzed. Malik was in the study reviewing scholarship applications. He looked at the security monitor. A rusted sedan sat outside the gate. It was spitting smoke from the exhaust pipe. Otis stood in the rain. He looked 20 years older. His hair was white and unkempt. He wore a cheap windbreaker that was soaked through. Viola sat in the passenger seat, her face hidden in her hands. Malik pressed the button. "Yes," he said. Malik's son Otis said into the speaker. His voice was cracked and desperate. "Please. We have nowhere to go. They took the car. They kicked us out of the motel. We need a place to sleep, just for a few nights." Malik looked at the man on the screen. He remembered the recording. "Dump them in the pauper's field. We are family," Otis pleaded. "You cannot leave us in the rain." Malik leaned into the microphone. He did not feel anger anymore. He felt only pity. "You made your choice," Otis, Malik said calmly. "You chose the money. You gambled the family and you lost." "Malik, please," Viola cried from the car. "I am your mother." Malik looked at the woman who had feigned a heart attack to trick him. "I have no mother," Malik said. "My mother died the day she tried to steal my integrity. But we are starving," Otis sobbed. "I sent the stipend check to your lawyer yesterday," Malik said. "It is enough for food and a small apartment. Go pick it up. But do not come here again. If you return, I will have you arrested for violating the restraining order." He released the button. The connection cut off. He watched on the monitor as Otis pounded on the iron gate. He watched him scream at the sky. He watched him get back into the rusted car and drive away into the rain. Malik turned off the monitor. He did not feel guilty. He felt clean. He had offered them mercy in the form of the stipend, but he would not offer them access. You can feed a snake, but you do not let it sleep in your bed. A week later, Malik held a press conference. He stood on the porch of the ranch house. Behind him stood the employees of Legacy Haulage and the staff of Iron Shield. He stepped up to the podium. The reporters were silent. "For months there have been rumors about my family and this estate," Malik began. "Today I am releasing the full financial records of the Washington Trust." He held up a thick binder. "Every penny is accounted for. We have donated 20% of our profits to local charities. We have fully funded the pensions of our drivers. And we have protected this land from development." He looked directly into the cameras. There are those who say I abandoned my family. The truth is, I saved the legacy that my family tried to destroy. A legacy is not about what you take, it is about what you build. And we are just getting started. The applause from his employees was loud and genuine. The community saw the truth. The whispers in the barbershop stopped. Deacon Jones came to the ranch the next Sunday and shook Malik's hand. The sellout label was gone. Malik was now the pillar. The final transformation began in the spring. Malik decided that the ranch should not just be a fortress, it should be a ladder. He established the Washington and Carter Foundation. The goal was simple: to provide capital and mentorship to young black men and women who wanted to build businesses in the trades. Mechanics, electricians, plumbers, truck drivers, the people who built the world with their hands. He turned the old barn into a training center. He filled it with tools and engines and computers. One Saturday morning, Malik walked out to the family cemetery located on a small hill overlooking the creek. The grass was freshly cut. 2 headstones stood side by side, Jeremiah Washington and Hattie Washington. Mr. Silas stood next to him holding a bouquet of fresh lilies. Elijah Stone stood on the other side leaning on his cane. "We did it," Malik said to the stones. "We kept it safe." Mr. Silas placed the flowers on Hattie's grave. "She would be proud, Mr. Malik. You did not just keep the money, you kept the values." Malik nodded. He knelt down and touched the cold granite of Big Papa's headstone. "I am sorry it had to be this way," Malik whispered. "I am sorry I could not save them." "You saved what mattered," Elijah said softly. "You saved the future." They stood there for a moment in the peaceful silence of the morning. The wind rustled through the oak trees. It sounded like a whisper of approval. Malik stood up. He looked down toward the barn. A group of 10 teenage boys was waiting there. They were from the inner city. They were kids who had been written off by their teachers and their neighbors. One boy in particular caught Malik's eye. His name was Jamal. He was 15 years old. He was skinny and quiet, and he always kept his head down. He reminded Malik of himself. "I have to go," Malik said to the 2 old men. "I have work to do." He walked down the hill. When he reached the barn, the boys quieted down. They looked at him with a mixture of awe and skepticism. They saw the suit he usually wore in magazines, but today, Malik was wearing blue coveralls. His hands were clean, but they were ready for work. He walked over to an old diesel engine mounted on a stand. It was a complex beast of metal and wires. "Who knows how this works?" Malik asked the group. Silence. Jamal raised his hand tentatively. "It makes the truck go," he mumbled. Malik smiled. "It does. But do you know why?" Jamal shook his head. Malik waved him over. "Come here, Jamal." The boy walked forward. He looked nervous. He expected to be lectured. He expected to be told to stand back. Malik picked up a heavy wrench. He held it out. "Take this," Malik said. Jamal took the wrench. It was heavy in his small hand. Malik pointed to the fuel injector. "When I was your age, my grandfather taught me that the world sees us one way," Malik said to the group. "They see us as problems to be solved, or they do not see us at all. But when you know how to fix things, when you know how to build things, you are undeniable." He put his hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You are not invisible here," son Malik said. "You are the future. Now put that wrench on the bolt and turn it." Jamal fit the wrench onto the bolt. He strained against it. "Use your leverage," Malik instructed gently. "Lean into it." Jamal pushed. The bolt gave way with a satisfying crack. Jamal looked up. His eyes were wide. A smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a boy who had just realized he had power. "Good job," Malik said. "Now let us take the whole thing apart and build it back better." Malik spent the rest of the afternoon covered in grease. He laughed with the boys. He showed them how to use the diagnostic tools. He told them stories about Big Papa driving through the night to make a delivery. As the sun began to set, Malik wiped his hands on a rag. He looked around the barn. He saw the focus in the boys' eyes. He saw the respect. He realized then that the legacy was not the land. It was not the $42 million in the trust. It was not the fleet of trucks. The legacy was this. It was the knowledge passed from one generation to the next. It was the ability to look at a broken engine or a broken life and say, "I can fix this." Malik Washington walked out of the barn and looked up at the big house. It was no longer a lonely fortress, it was a lighthouse. He took a deep breath of the cool evening air. He was 33 years old. He had lost his past, but he had found his purpose. And for the first time in a long time, he was truly happy. Lesson learned. Betrayal from blood is the sharpest blade, but it is also the surgery that removes the cancer from your life. In this story, Malik teaches us that being a good man does not mean being a doormat for toxic relatives. True power lies in the ability to stand alone to protect your peace and to build a legacy based on merit, not entitlement. You cannot carry everyone to the mountaintop, especially those who are trying to break your legs. Sometimes you have to cut the dead weight to fly. Respect is earned, never inherited.